welcome everyone. This is Maintainers and Community Track Day 3. My name is Inessa Posson, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the committee. We have Team Monko with the talk from the outside in, how the Napari community supports users and empowers transition to contribution.
All right, thank you, Inessa. Thank you everybody for being here. I'm really excited. Sankit's talk before mine was great if you were here for that, which my talk will hopefully show you if you do all of that stuff, if you get your community all in a row, you'll get some great new contributors. And I'm really excited to be here today. I still don't know how or why I'm standing here, as I'm sure many of you have stumbled your way into contributing to open source. But I'm here to tell you about how Napari brings in both users and new contributors, like me. And the first way they do that is I'm actually going to show you what Napari is, especially if you didn't see it at the tech demo this morning, because that was my first experience, was just seeing how cool it was. I mean, we can like interact with data in 3D. We can look at it in 2D and scroll through time or whatever, and look back at it and compare our results of our experiment. And like this was super awesome. And then also had this other like really clever thing. This console that they have attached is like you can like learn basically how Python works, because it's all just hooked up to Python. So like there we go. We set a variable, right? Now I got I'm the author. What are the layers in the thing? And it was like this really cool introduction to Python. So sometimes showing off your cool stuff in the community can get people started. So some other things that just kind of helped me show off Napari is like it works on this really cool data that I'm interested in. I'm a biologist, I'm a neuroscientist. This is like remote viewing some really large multi-scale data. Or here, if you're interested in like X-ray stuff, come help sprint with us. We want to help get this hooked up. But it's not just limited to images, and so I was like, wow, this is just a really cool tool in general. And so again, it was being shown off, and here's it's being used for analysis to track cells. And it was just a really appealing environment. Like I said, I'm here today to talk to you more about my journey to now be a contributor. And so I'll give you the takeaways at first, so you kind of know the layout of my talk. And that first is that I want to talk about a truth about open science that I've learned. And I think sometimes you might be feeling that this is what open science is sort of this panicked laying down of the tracks before you so that you can keep going forward. And it does feel that way. But I also want to maybe help you think about where you actually are trying to lay those tracks, and what those tracks behind you help bring people to catch up with you and be a part of your community. So the real truth that I think about open science is that we can never really grasp the reach and importance of our community. There are so many people that we don't know we help. I was one of those for years, and now I'm a part of the team. So my takeaway is invest in people and not just Python. And so I'm going to tell you how the bioimage analysis community in Napari has done that, with supports for novices, how Napari helps users get started, how Napari encourages non-core contributions in the form of plugins, and how Napari supports and accelerates new contributors. And my main takeaway is that we really need to look and see how every single person has something of value to contribute, and we just need to make it possible. And so sometimes that contribution might not come in the form that we normally think about, in the form of code, but even just being present in the community, answering questions, sort of being a user is a big way to actually contribute to a project and kind of keep it important. But I'll start my story, my timeline, a little bit out of order with my postdoc advisor, who I wouldn't be here today. He's the greatest biologist ever. He's never been able to learn to prioritize coding. He doesn't know how, and he doesn't even use Napari that much. But he's always sort of believed in this vision that I have. I'm like, well, this sort of stuff isn't good enough. We should figure out how to do our analyses better. And he's like, okay, I trust you. And I'm like, I don't trust me. So I hope if you can know who those people are in your life and kind of really give them the trust to do really cool stuff. I'm pretty proud of myself. I've done some cool stuff over the past few years. And so let people go wild. But it's not just my advisor, Tommy. It's also all these other biologists who really don't want to learn to code either. And they all use my stuff too, because Napari is really user-friendly. And now some of them have been tricked into learning to code because they need to do some more complicated stuff than we allow. But that's the goal, right? Get people started and you never know where they go. And so they've been kind of just using the stuff that I make, and what's the best part is I'm always interacting with the biologists, and that's just a pleasure. But I think here's sort of my growth curve of Python in blue, where it slowly goes up over time. A lot of ups and downs. You probably feel this way, maybe bigger ups and downs. But the reality that I learned is that other people around me, especially my scientist colleagues, really valued what I could contribute to them. And the problem that I had is that at the time, I thought the open source community, I wasn't good enough for it. I thought that I was somewhere way on the bottom, like I didn't really have this knowledge. But I actually learned that, well, I probably should have been contributing sooner. It's okay that I didn't. But really, other people probably value my knowledge more than I even realize. And that's, I think, something that we need to figure out how to share with our community in general. So here's a little timeline, because like I said, it's going to be sort of my journey, but it's really about all sorts of people in my life. So in 2017, I started grad school, and I was using this bioimage analysis software called Fiji or ImageJ, which is written in Java. It's a cool thing. I've got some stuff out of it. In 2022 is when I started my postdoc. I was trying to use Fiji still, and I was running into some limitations, and there was some other cool stuff going on. So I started using Python and Napari. I started making that Napari plugin in 2023, so around 2.5 years ago. And then in 2024, I went to present at Bioimaging North America, which if you're involved in this at all, go to that conference, it's awesome. And I presented my plugin, and people were like, whoa, you should like do more. And I was like, I don't know about that. But a lot has happened in the past 6 months. As I said, I'm a part of the core team now. But really, I submitted this abstract back in February when I was just sort of, in my mind, a new contributor. And I was really excited to kind of, I don't know, I just thought it would be fun to go to SciPy, so I thought this would be interesting to send. And Carol's really great and sort of encouraged me to do this. So that's my updated title slide now. It's University of Minnesota and Napari. So that's where we're at. But here is a non-Python guy. This is Kevin Elisari. He was my herald of open source. And I think everybody in this room can be that for somebody. So when I was in my second year of graduate school, he came to my university and gave this talk about how you use ImageJ for image analysis. But he also taught how does he do science in his lab. And he said for him, what's been successful is doing science and bioimage analysis. And I was like, wow, that's my role model right there. That's who I want to be. And then I thought, well, I'll never be that person. But I still, on the side, kind of kept trickling down the road to kind of go that direction. So really he sort of started it off. But so did Fiji, because you could click the buttons in the GUI, and it'll sort of print out this, it's the macro language of ImageJ, and it's basically looks like code to me, and it is. But it's not like true Java or anything. And you can turn that into cool scripts that you make like GUIs with. And that's really cool because then my lab mates could use what I wrote and they could like push the buttons that they needed and get things to work. And that was really cool too. And then I kind of like didn't know where to go from there. It was really intimidating to go from there to sort of distributing something. And maybe the documentation is there, but it didn't hit me at the time. And so that's kind of where I got stuck. And I wanted more. I didn't want to just keep sharing USB sticks and emails of my files as I updated it, right? Like, it was horrible version control. I didn't even know what I actually published my paper with at a certain point. So I made a repo with stuff that I found. But that's where I was at. I didn't know better. I had no one to teach me, and I think that that's really important. I had no direct mentors, but I'm going to show you today all the indirect mentors that have gotten me here. And that's an important point, is in my abstract I wrote a non-traditional contributor, and that's a cool thing about the review process, and was like, what does that mean? Well, I'm not talking about a biologist. I think biologists are just as much of an equal contributor as computer scientists are. I'm talking about the people that have no direct mentor to say, how do I contribute, and then actually go do that. And you really are left with the basic questions of how do I contribute? What am I supposed to contribute? Why should I contribute? And then when? Like, am I good enough? Do I know enough now to start? And I think this is also a problem that other contributors which maybe have more experience in your community, they don't know if they'll be ignored or welcomed, and they don't know if their contribution will be rejected or valued. So I think that that's really what we're facing, and what I hope to show you today, all the things that have helped me. So here's now we're in the timeline. With my advisor back, I started my postdoc. We were going to study brain development. I was going to learn to culture live neurons, image them, and then quantify them. And I was like, yeah, I'm gung-ho. I got the skills to do that. And then I was getting these images, and like these are some simple images just to kind of give you an idea. We want to do thousands of these in a dish over time. was way harder than I thought. And so ImageJ kind of like was a little less than what I needed at the time. ImageJ is fantastic. It's a great tool. You should use it for if it works. But all these deep learning models were coming out in Python, and I was like, oh yeah. And then this community forum, forum.imagesc, is really like the bioimaging forum. There was this kind of buzz at the time about Napari, right? The community was reaching out, and cool things were happening. And so I really started to learn from it by the Napari community going out beyond their walls. And one of those people in the Napari community is Robert Haas, and he is like a professor and teaches a lot about bioimage analysis. And so he has these notebooks which teach you how to do Python. Because I was like trying to learn Python from those like websites that like teach you how to do Python, and it was just like, oh, I don't know what this is. But I knew what thresholding was. I knew what numbers look like. And that was really accessible for me. And then part of this is that Napari was being used in these teaching materials, and it just became a very natural evolution. So teaching and tutorializing your materials is, I think, really great to get new contributors. Peter, who's in this room, you maybe met him at this conference over there. Peter was great because I have a lot to thank for Peter. In 2021, like COVID style, he got this new laptop and was trying to get Napari up and running. And so it led him to ask, I love it. He was always an example for me. He asked like the basic questions. He wasn't afraid, and people were really nice, and they tried to figure it out. But I also love this one post where he says, I really like the y equals function x syntax. It reminds me of R. And I was like, I use R. That's how I do my data science, right? Like, I know, but that's where I was at too, right? And it was like one of those things where I was like, oh, I can do my data science and my image analysis in the same language? That's perfect. Nothing will beat that. So that's how I fell in love with Napari and Python. So I think really kind of focusing where your community should be can really help it get the recognition that you need. So I'm going to show you a little bit more of a demo. Here's why it's also cool, because you want to like get people to use this. And so let's say we've got some like data that I was using sort of in graduate school. Here's some brain cells, you know, this is a small sample of it. And we've got one of Robert's plugins here. We open it up. It's got this cool like calculator interface for my friends who don't want to see code. You know, we were on this layer, we remove the noise, we take the background out, we label it, 3 clicks, we've made segmented images with labels, we can quantify that. That's awesome. And then it's like really cool because you can go back and be like, well, how does this layer look? Or what does that other value look like? And you get like this this is so much cooler to a beginner than code is, right? Like this is awesome. And plugins do also more than that. There's a whole ecosystem, as Draga mentioned this morning, 500 plugins now, over 500. You can just install it direct from the UI. You can download this as a bundled app, and people never have to see code in their life, unfortunately, because they should. It's awesome. But these plugins can do cool stuff like clustering of your cells, and then you can like live select them and visualize them. Like, man, when you see this, it's cool. And that's really what I want to encourage you. Find like what makes your package shine and show that off. The other thing that really shines when you're beginning, because you want to get started in all this, is really our documentation is awesome. You open it up, it tells you what Napari does, and then it really kind of hints you to like, hey, check out to learn more, install, get started. Here's, we've got tutorials, right? We've got this whole thing of examples. It's beautiful. Maybe if you've seen like the scikit image gallery, it's something like that. That's something I'm familiar with. And all of these resources exist. And then there's this other tab, plugins. And I was like, oh, cool, I want to learn more about plugins. And then you keep learning more about plugins, and you see plugin users and then plugin developers. Like, you're going to teach me how to build it and best practices. I don't even know what testing is, but why would I make a test for myself? That seemed weird. And so that's kind of where we went. But this was there. It was there for me to consume. And so this was in case the internet didn't work. And there we go. Now we get to Draga again. So Draga made this video years ago now, which was how to turn your little code stubs into a plugin in, it was about 43 minutes or something like that. The title's a little misleading. So I watched this, I probably have watched this video, I am not kidding you, 15 times. not the full thing, but going back and forth to really learn. So you never really know how valuable something like that can be for people. And so maybe this talk today can help somebody in the future. I don't know. But that's the thing. We don't know our reach. So here's really the magic of what Napari can do. Here's a function. We can ignore the types right now. We've got threshold. We take the data, and we take it where it's greater than the Otsu algorithm says it should be. And that's a function of how to threshold. And then all we got to do is add this magic GUI decorator. We type it, and then there we have a GUI when we add it to Napari. That's why it's called Magic GUI. And this is another way to really onboard a new user. And I was like, man, I'm starting to make GUIs. That's awesome. And then we can turn that into a package really easily. We have a template now. It was a cookie cutter before. It prompts you. It lets you know all that information, the gobbledygook that fills your Pi Project TOML, and then it fills it all out, gives you a license. You look very official. You feel so proud of yourself because you've got 20 files with dots before them, and you don't know what that's for. But oh, that's cool. This is my reality, right? So why did I keep going though? You run into something and you're like, I don't really get how to do this. I don't really know what to do. And you start to really feel alone, especially when you are a bit shy like me. As you've noticed, I haven't reached out at any point. There were those things that Sanket was talking about, a code of conduct, weekly meetings, a community chat, videos and tutorials. I honestly like to put a financial sponsorship. It felt very real, official. I never went to any of this, but the important part is that I read, and I was there, and I was always observing. I never asked questions, but I was reading everything that people wrote. So when I say about Peter asking those beginning questions on the forums, I've read those posts over and over to help myself. And so I think sometimes we don't even realize this archive that we leave behind us. And so, yes, we're tired, we're exhausted, and another issue to reply to is too much. But if we do it well, I think it can benefit so many people in the future. And so here's what I created just to show it off. This is sort of what I've been doing. So here's a thing. It's got different stuff. A lot of it's about bringing batch to kind of Napari, which mostly works on kind of single images from the GUI perspective. So now we're going to open an image that's a little harder to do. And here's a sample neuron. I've cropped it out. And I want to segment this, which is actually really hard. So let's just do a quick machine learning classifier where, I don't know, we're just going to say, yep, that's where a neuron is, but then we need to make this smaller because those are tiny little branches. And this is hard on the mouse podium, but we'll get it. We'll draw. This isn't going to be great, but that's the idea. Okay, let's make this a little bigger. Okay, there we go. Now we're saying that's where the neuron is, and all we got to do is say, here's where some background is. And yeah, all right, we're going to pick some features. This is what I teach biologists to do all the time. We're going to just tick the layers from the viewer. We're going to hit train and hope nothing happens. Here we go. Yeah, it's working. We trained it. Now we predict with it. Like I said, not going to be great, but hey, that's decent for in the middle of a presentation. We can do this in batch. We can make this. We can make biologists do really cool stuff really quick and made it accessible. So from there, I started to get data from my own stuff. And actually, I will say, GUIs are great because I have more fun doing this than writing code, which is weird. But I think it's sort of the fruits of my effort, But I have a lot of, this is probably 4 undergrads that have helped get this data, and they're all using it and learning it. And I make videos for my lab, and they watch them to learn how to use it. But I think more than that, from a maintenance and contributor perspective, it really brought confidence for me, where I learned Python. I learned what the heck GitHub was. That was always really scary. I learned how to structure a package, what CI was, why it kept breaking. I was able to learn about tests. And all of those things I did by myself. And I probably should have asked for help sooner, but I didn't. And a lot of people don't. That's the truth. You can see the bursts where I go before conferences, and I'm like, I got to fix some stuff. But it really became a way for me to be introduced by kind of sidecarring myself to a project. And so if that's a possibility in yours, it's great. The whole time, though, it was useful to my colleagues. It didn't matter how good my code was. It's still terrible. I want to go back and fix it, but I'm having fun with Napari. So here's Bioimaging North America, and hopefully you've met her so far. Beth is in this room. Beth works on Cell Profiler, which is another bioimage analysis tool written in Python. It's been around for 20 years. But really, out of Bioimaging North America, it wasn't just Beth. Beth was probably the best there, but there was an encouragement to contribute. Just like SciPy has been this like really welcoming, joyful conference, Bioimaging North America was that way. And I think really having this open community here, I've actually met a lot of newcomers to Python. Some people that have been using Python for like a month or two. I don't know how they ended up here, but that's awesome. And really, we can be a source that brings people in. And so we have a lot to learn from Self Profiler. They've got amazing like tutorialization. Check it out if you want. It's really, really good. And I left that conference being told, hey, you should contribute. And I was like, I don't know how. So I went on to the repo, and they had these good first issues. And you know what that good first issue was? They realized they had to take some periods off to make things like be aesthetically pleasing. And they said, oh, that's a good first issue. And it sat there for like 6 weeks. And I was like, oh, I shouldn't do that. That's for somebody else. But I decided to. I took the periods off. It was like an 8-line change PR. People were happy. Drago was excited. Everyone was excited. And I was excited. Man, the dopamine that I got for taking periods off was the best thing. Now I'm addicted, okay? But it was because I took periods off. So, like, be thoughtful. Make good first issues. I think it's huge. So, really, a long time might be needed for someone to start. I've made my first issue in Napari because I was working on Mac versus Windows with some people. And, yeah. 2 years later, we triaged it and realized it could be closed. And I like this little post that I made. Back when I made this, I was such a timid newcomer to Napari. Nice to see how things have changed, both with Napari and myself. And so I think that's the big part is I want to encourage you to realize that you can change the world. And I think maybe you're told that in whatever discipline you sort of learn. But I can tell you that because I've experienced it. My whole life has changed because of how people have supported me. And it's been really valuable. And one of the things that I wanted to do was start to contribute more, and it was still confusing. But Napari actually gives you guides on how you contribute to Napari. And I don't really see this in a lot of other ecosystems where it like teaches you how to set up a dev environment. Something that you could look up on like general Python documentation. But you've always had these unique things maybe that your package requires or what your optional dependencies are that you need. And this really can make someone not just go, oh, I can learn that, but then I have to figure it out for this project, but say, I can do that. I can follow directions as long as the directions are right. And if they're not, contribute them. It also teaches you just general tips and tricks for software dev, which was like, that made me feel like someone wanted me to be involved. There are actual guides on how to use GitHub, like how to make pull requests and stuff. There's an architecture guide to understand the spaghetti, so when you're a little bit worried about where these files are supposed to be, they tell you about their design ethos, even if they admit that they are working on it and trying to figure it out. Not me, I haven't done it. There's also many supporting repos, and I think we forget this. A lot of libraries do have all these kind of like branching out. And to someone who hasn't been in the project and watched that happen, it's really intimidating. There's guides, in particular, I want to highlight this, guides on how to contribute documentation and examples, especially if you use Sphinx. It's really confusing. But this is a great way for newcomers to come in, and that's actually what they did. They were like, hey, you've got ideas, why don't you write that down? I was like, yeah, but I don't know it well enough. I don't know as good as you. And they're like, no, you do. You know this because you use it. And that's really, I think, a great way that we can get people. Most of my stuff early on was contributing examples. They were really excited about it. But most importantly, there was a consistent encouragement to contribute and reach out. And that was in the form of both the people and the documentation and the tracks that they laid down behind them. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of fly through a few things that got me there. The community meetings, as was mentioned by Sanket. It's really great. It just was where I went. I met Carol, who is a great leader. And I think one of the greatest things that we can do in leadership is bring up those around us, pick them up and get them and put them where they are. I remember one of the calls I hung up after a community meeting, and I was telling my wife, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone says Carol's really great. I mean, she is, but like she's like, up here. And I'm like, but she said that she's my biggest fan. And like, man, the feeling I had in my heart, so I was so excited. I was telling everyone in my lab and all of this stuff. And so really, you might be that person to somebody, and don't be afraid to do that. here's Juan. He's one of the co-founders of Napari, and I think that he's been around the project a while. And sometimes you feel a little, you kind of get the sludge build up on you, and you sort of feel that as if you've been in a project for a while. And so one of the things that he always told me is he just loved my optimism. He loved that I saw the good things and not just the bugs. But he also was a fount of project history, right? Even though he carried that with him, he was not afraid to say, here's how I can help. So here's a Zulip chat, right? Great for making friends. And then they invited me to be a core developer. And I was so excited because I was working really hard, and it was nice to be recognized. I didn't ever think I would get there, but I was having so much fun. Like I said, it was a very addicting dopamine rush. But I also want to let you know that even recently, we're trying to constantly be thoughtful. And maybe even the word core developer isn't appropriate. It's not as approachable. One of the reasons I didn't do it is because I wasn't a developer. I didn't want to contribute to Napari because I didn't think I had anything to bring. And so maybe even defining yourself as core contributors or the core team, which is what we're going with for now, we're going to workshop it probably, can actually give a sense of invitation to people that have different ways to contribute to your project. And so here's the updated timeline. In February, I submitted that abstract. April, I got the core team invite. And then they gave me a contract to be the community manager. And now they gave me a contract to be release manager. And I'm still a full-time postdoc, so this is a great ride, and I'm going for it. But that's the thing. If you've got someone motivated, give them a chance. They'll have a lot of fun. So here's my new title, From the Outside In and Back Outwards Again. What are we doing? We've got a roadmap. We're trying to bring the community up to snuff. And I'm going to try to use my experiences as both being a user for a long time and, well, I'm really passionate about this, as you can tell, and we're going to try to figure out how to spread this into the community and help it grow. So here's the great core team and all the people that have helped the project over the years. And this is an invitation for everyone to come sprint with us. We've got good sprint labels, hopefully. And even if it's just you want to figure out how to put your data in Napari, we'd love that as an example. Like, genuinely, that's what we want. So come sprint with us and join our socials. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is encouragement and maybe a brag. So I put my first community manager post that I had to do. I said, I'd love feedback from the community, and that's always my goal, if anyone has anything to say. And Horst here, who kind of bounces in and out every few months, he said, Napari might be the best discussed and maintained project on GitHub. I love the community. And we all know that's not true. But it's true to somebody, and that's what you need to remember. And so remember that track that you left behind you, watch where you're going, and you will be the best maintained project on GitHub for somebody. And you'll change their life just like mine was changed. So that's what I have to say. So just thank you all.
All right, we have time for a couple of questions. The first question is from Elvika, who asks, or who says, I can't believe you identify as an introvert. What a brilliant talk. Clapping hands. Your work as a researcher biologist in open source is very relatable and super interesting. Can you share how we can replicate this experience for people in our community who are lurkers but struggle to take steps towards co-development and maintenance?
What was the word that you was it? Like lookers? Lurkers. What can we do? Well, I think it's a team effort, and I think part of it is admitting and watching your progress that you've made. So one thing that I've noticed since I've joined the community, multiple people have told me that my presence, my newbiness, has been actually encouraging them to want to step in. And so I think my biggest recommendation in your project is bring in those new people and like have them be a part of it faster than maybe you're comfortable with, because you're going to keep bringing in new people that way because they're going to feel like they too belong. And I think trying to just lower that barrier for what feels like belonging is helpful.
Tetsu asks, I believe that tightly coupling Qt with the library's design introduces significant challenges for long-term maintenance. As a community, what strategies or practices do you follow to manage this effectively?
So Tetsu asked a very technical question that we do face. And this is what I was talking about in terms of, like, we have the architecture guide that tries to describe this. And the architecture guide describes we should be doing it this way, but we're not. And that might be what you face. And my encouragement is that's what, when someone comes up with that, when I came up with it, they said, come to the community meeting, we'll talk you through it. And I would be like, Yeah, okay, but I don't know what a type is still. Like I still, even though I've been using them, I didn't really understand them. So just when it's a maintenance hurdle like that and you're trying to bring in new people, just reinforce that you'll be there to help them through it.
Okay, we have 2 more questions, and we have time for 2 more questions. So, first question from Julie. You have a great setup for encouraging contributors to Napari. What ways do you outreach to find and encourage new contributors outside of your regular Napari-specific meetings? What has been, in your opinion, the most effective method therein?
Wow. Okay, that's a great question. I think first off to say that's a place that I have room to do work myself. I think we have work to do in spreading back out. So I mentioned the forum.imagesc. That was really active a few years ago and kind of died down a little bit. And it was actually one of the reasons why I kind of wasn't sure I wanted to start with Napari, because I kind of thought I saw it dwindling a little bit. And so I think we really want to be conscious about getting out, not just want to say we should do work, and we're trying.
Great. And Nate asks, how does having the option of having plugins impact contributions to the core package?
I don't think I quite understand the question. If you're in the audience, could you kind of clarify it? Yeah.
I work on a package where everyone contributes to the main item.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering if you have the option of making plugins, do people end up still contributing?
Okay. Yeah, that's also, I think, one of the biggest challenges we've faced. There's been like a lack of communication and collaboration. And what we've actually seen, unfortunately, is people end up reinventing the wheel or doing things that we would want to be a core contribution. So this is one of the goals that I've been bringing in, because I came in as a plugin developer. And I think we need to set better guidelines on what we want as core contributions, and really to find out what people are doing and say, come bring that to us. We've tried to do that lately, and it's hard because it is easier to work on your own plugin. And so there are practical challenges as well. And the other one is actually a maintenance problem, where people create these really great plugins, but then they graduate or whatever, they move on in life. And then we kind of have these sort of hanging around in a state that isn't maintained. So while there's a lot of advantages to it, we really do have those disadvantages. And I'm going to try to work on communicating and bridging back. We're going to probably start a working group soon to address some of this. But yeah, it's a big goal.